Exposed. How freezing my daughter's trust fund transformed our lives after the wedding drama. The sun hung low over Maplewood, casting golden hues on the lawns of blooming lilacs. The air was thick with anticipation. Emily's wedding day was just around the corner. Every detail had been planned, every dream envisioned since childhood. But Jake Thompson was about to face a truth that would turn this fairy tale upside down. Little did he know, beneath the pastel hues and vibrant flowers lay a storm that would unravel everything he held dear. Jake, a hard-working mechanic, had spent decades tightening bolts and fixing engines, pouring everything he had into his family. Integrity was his currency, and as he wiped the grease from his forehead, he thought more about Emily's future than his own struggles. He had always wanted to give her the best in education, a beautiful home, a life without regret. But what happens when the person you love most makes a choice that shatters that vision? Just days before the wedding, Jake stumbled upon a shocking revelation about her fiancé, a slick businessman named Daniel. The privilege radiated off him, but behind twisted smiles, Jake sensed something dark. Emily, so caught up in fairy tales, couldn't see it. Daniel wasn't who he pretended to be. Information came in whispers, reckless rumors that nipped at Jake's heart. He had to protect Emily. It was his duty, his blood. The decision weighed heavy like a lead ball in his gut. Could he really freeze Emily's trust fund? An act that sent shivers through his bones? Sarah, his wife, illuminated the room with her optimism, making her unwavering belief in a bright future feel like a beacon of hope amid a tempest. "Jake, you're overreacting," she said, hurt in her eyes. "You can't just take this away from her." As they stood in their kitchen, fought behind closed doors, the tension between them surged like electricity. Jake's heart ached. The clock was ticking, and with each tick the wedding approached, thick with dreams yet woven in chaos. Families were divided. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Wedding day arrived with a flood of emotions, smiles plastered on faces while Jake's heart wrestled with fear. Guests arrived early, chatting excitedly, oblivious to the turmoil underneath. Sarah tried to comfort him, but it only deepened his sorrow. The moment was supposed to be magical, but as Emily walked down the aisle, dressed like a princess, it only cast a shadow of doubt over Jake's heart. Chaos erupted as Daniel's past unspooled like a jagged thread, unraveling. Vows were left unsaid, dreams dashed, and voices rose. This was no mere wedding. It became a battlefield. Secrets spilled. Generational wounds awakened. And amidst it, Jake realized true wealth wasn't material. It was in love, forgiveness, and kinship. But what had he done? Gripped by frustrations and love, he looked through the lens of a community torn between supporting him or condemning him. Could they begin to heal? Could they change? Just as clarity flickered, an unexpected visitor arrived, branching from the shadows and stirring the pot further. Jake's heart pounded. Were they truly ready to face the revelations about Emily's fiancé? Or had he unwittingly opened a Pandora's box that could tear the family apart forever? The stakes were too high, and everything was on the line as the tension thickened like fog rolling over Maplewood. Everything felt suspended, teetering on the edge of a knife. What would become of them now? The crowd buzzed with whispers and shock, their faces a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Jake stood transfixed, heart racing like a wild stallion, trying to process the words that had collapsed over the ceremony like a thunderstorm. Emily, his little girl, stood there, eyes wide, absorbing the full brunt of what had just unraveled. For a moment, time appeared to freeze. Laughter melted into the cold air, becoming nothing more than a long echo. "What are you doing here?" Emily's voice quivered, breaking through the stunned silence that felt too heavy to lift. The unexpected visitor was none other than Karen, Daniel's estranged sister. She stood defiantly at the edge of the gathered crowd, her presence like a storm cloud ready to burst at any moment. "Emily, wait. You don't know the whole story." Karen's gaze swept across the wary onlookers, her breath hitching as she took in the sea of judgmental faces. many of which she recognized from her own childhood in Maplewood. Jake felt a fire ignite within. He understood that this wasn't just about Emily anymore. Every second was crucial. "Is this true?" he shouted, the words sputtering out almost involuntarily. "Did you know about Daniel's past?" A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Sarah, standing beside Jake, squeezed his arm softly. "You have to let her speak," she murmured, but Jake's emotions roared. Was this man a monster after all? Did he deceive them all so completely? "I did everything to protect him," Karen replied, her voice wavering. "He has made mistakes, yes. But he has changed. I swear it, we grew up in a rough place. Daniel was a different person back then. You have to believe me." Emily's face twisted in confusion and pain. "Changed? You mean like lying to me about who he really is?" The hurt was evident, turning her voice into a trembling whisper. The weight of guilt and fear began to settle in the pit of Jake's stomach. He wanted to shield her, yet that instinct battled against the nagging questions swirling through his mind. Was he really doing the right thing by putting a freeze on her trust and risking their lives together? Was it worth the fallout that had just exploded in front of them? "Emily," Jake began, feeling sincerity break through the chaos inside him. "I wanted to protect you, but maybe I was too blind to see you're not a child anymore. Can you forgive us for trying to hold you back?" Tears pricked Emily's eyes, glistening against the radiant sunlight. She swayed slightly, both beautiful and heart-wrenching. A vision of a daughter caught between love for her father and confusion from her betrayed trust. "I don't know anymore," she whispered, taking a step toward Daniel. Then pausing, fear stitching her brow, a low murmur rose among the guests. The wedding hadn't just been derailed. It felt as though the very foundations of the families involved were crumbling. Jake felt the heat of shame and regret wash over him, realizing he thrust his family into this storm as he fought for what he thought was best. But deep down, a flicker of hope ignited within. Perhaps this was their chance to rebuild and redefine what family truly meant. Forgiveness was necessary, even if the stakes felt impossibly high. Jake took a step closer to Emily, determination fueling him. "We'll face this together. Promise you." But just as the first glimmers of clarity struck, Daniel spoke up. "You all don't know the truth yet, but you're about to." The weight of those words vibrated through the air like a drum, hinting at more depth to his story, spiraling into secrets that they weren't ready to hear. Jake's stomach twisted. What revelations lay ahead, and could they handle the truth? A moment of stillness lapsed, thick with uncertainty. The crowd held its breath. One choice would change everything. Would they find the strength to embrace the truth? Or would it push them further apart in the fragile web of love? The silence stretched, tangled with tension. All eyes were pinned on Daniel, who seemed to be gathering his thoughts like storm clouds before a downpour. The crowd was a live wire, thrumming with anticipation. Jake felt Emily inch closer to Daniel as if she were drawn in by unseen strings. He could practically feel her heart beating with the weight of decision. "What truth?" Jake's voice cut through the air, tinged with anger. "What else can you say that could possibly justify the lies?" He clenched his fists, battling the surge of protectiveness that wanted to drown out everything else. "Please," Karen interjected, stepping forward. "Just hear him out." Her pleading gaze flicked between Emily and the crowd, desperately seeking understanding. Jake's sternness softened a fraction as he snapped back to Emily. Her mix of dread and desire to believe Daniel was profound. She was caught in a storm of her own between a man who had just shattered her trust and the yearning for familial stability. They were all standing on a precipice, ready to see if they would fall or fly. Daniel straightened, his former bravado flickering like a flame. "Years ago I made choices, terrible choices. I was lost and I hurt a lot of people. But I went to rehab, changed my life. I've worked hard to atone for what I did, especially to Karen. She had to carry the burden of my mistakes." Jake shook his head, confusion clouding the reality around him. "And you thought you could just hide that from Emily? From all of us?" Daniel took a deep breath, the air thick with pain. "I thought protecting her meant keeping her away from my past. I didn't want to be the reason she felt fear." Looked over her shoulder. "I thought what? That lies would keep her safe?" Jake interrupted, frustration flaring again. "That she wouldn't deserve the truth?" Emily stepped between the two men, and her voice emerged stronger than ever. "You can't keep truths from people you love. Look where that got us." Her gaze was fierce, fueled by betrayal yet anchored in the search for honesty. She turned toward Daniel, her heart conflicting but her resolve clear. If we're going to move forward, I need to hear everything. If you've truly changed, then I deserve the whole story. The crowd stirred as more eyes turned toward Daniel, their expressions shifting from shock to curiosity. Jake felt a small thrum of hope within him. Maybe, just maybe, Emily had the strength to draw the truth like light piercing through darkness. Daniel looked at Emily, his eyes brimming with all the apologies he couldn't voice. I've hidden too much. There are things about my past, about our family, that I have to explain. Not just the bad but the good that came from it too. It's complicated. Emily shifted her weight, wrestling visibly with her fear and hope. I want to know. I need to know, but it hurts. Her face twisted in a mix of anger and tears, carving lines into her cheeks that Jake desperately wished he could wipe away. The raw honesty in her voice hung in the air, tangible and unblinking as the murmurs from the crowd turned to hushed whispers of concern and curiosity. Karen stepped closer to her brother, her expression softening. Daniel, tell her about the family scars. About how they shaped you and us. We cannot build bridges on half-truths. Jake felt caught in the storm between the past and the possibility of a future renewed, yet shadowed by impending revelations. Clarity slipped through his fingers, and all he could think of was how much he wanted to protect Emily from potential fallout. Is this really the time for confessions? He asked, desperation tinging his voice. Do we even know what might come out of it? Emily nodded, biting her lip. But we need the truth if we're going to heal. Daniel steeled himself, each word hanging like it was coated in a painful truth. All right then. It's time you all knew what really happened, what I did after I left home. The darkness I created. The air thickened with anticipation, emotions ready to burst forth. Jake's heart thundered in his chest. Did they have the strength to face this together, or would it tear them apart for good? Just as Daniel began to speak, a sudden commotion broke out in the crowd, drawing attention away from the moment. What now? Jake spun around, dread settling deep in his gut. What was about to unfold? Jake's heart raced as the murmuring escalated into shouts. Get off me! Echoed through the crowd, sharp and piercing. Instinctively, he stepped forward, ready to restore order, but his eyes were drawn to the scuffle at the edge of the gathering. Two figures were locked in a heated argument, faces twisted with anger. One of them was a stranger, but the other, Jake's stomach lurched, was his former friend, Mark. He hadn't seen him in years, not since the fallout that had ripped their friendship apart. Memories flashed. Laughter over beers, secrets shared under starlit skies, then everything falling apart when accusations flew. Jake shot a glance at Emily and Daniel. They were just as transfixed, their expressions brimming with confusion. The crowd continued to part, revealing Mark shoving the other man away. You don't know what you're talking about. You think you have the right to stop. Just stop. Jake shouted, trying to cut through the chaos. The weight of the moment crashed down on him, pulling him in multiple directions. He wanted to hear Daniel's truth, and yet here stood Mark, a figure from the past, holding his own baggage. Before he could take another step, Daniel surged past him, driven by an impulse Jake couldn't fathom. Mark, what are you doing here? His voice had an edge, both defensive and accusatory. Mark turned, his eyes narrowing as he spotted Daniel. I'm here for, well, I didn't expect to find you here, of all places. The tension between them sparked with the resentment of old wounds. Jake sensed the two men were intertwined by secrets yet untold. They shared a history heavier than the air around them. Karen, shaking with urgency, reached for Daniel's arm, her voice rising. This isn't the time for old feuds. We're on the verge of something important. But Mark wasn't backing down. He crossed his arms defiantly. Important? Really? You mean to say this family is about to rehash old lies and sweep everything under the rug again? He gestured wildly, drawing the attention of the crowd that had paused to witness the unfolding drama. Jake's frustration boiled over. What are you talking about? This isn't about you, Mark. Even as he lashed out, he felt the shadows of doubt cling to him. Was Mark just looking to stir trouble? Or was there something deeper? As the vibe shifted, Emily stepped forward, her eyes brimming with determination. Enough. If we're going to heal, we need everyone here. Mark, you have to tell us why you're really here. Her voice, though trembling, was firm, and it cut through the chaos like a beacon. Mark hesitated, his facade flickering, as if he were a moment away from confessing something crucial. I came because I thought I could help. I didn't realize his voice trailed, caught somewhere between anger and vulnerability. Jake exchanged a glance with Emily, their hearts beating as one. The tension grew thicker. What could Mark possibly reveal that would intertwine his fate with Daniel's? The stakes were climbing, and Jake felt the growing pressure of everything threatening to explode. Spit it out. Daniel's impatience exploded. If you really think this is the time, then say it. And just like that, the silence fell again, but this time it was laced with anticipation. All eyes were on Mark, waiting. Jake's gut instinct urged him to prepare for the worst. Would this moment transform their lives all over again? As Mark opened his mouth, a chill gripped the gathering. The air felt electric, charged with unspoken words that had the power to fracture everything or bind them all together. You don't understand what this family is really built on. Jake's heart dropped, fear flooding him. What was about to come to light? Would it unite them or finally tear everything apart? Mark took a deep breath, and in that moment Jake could see the gears turning in his mind. You don't understand what this family is really built on. He paused, forcing the words out as if they were pulling on an old wound, one that had yet to heal. The secrets, they run deeper than any of us thought. Jake's pulse quickened. He could feel the crowd's collective breath hitching. Every single person waiting, hoping for either dread or salvation. Memories of their days as friends flickered through his mind, moments interlaced with laughter and confessions. But as Mark continued, that past felt like a distant echo, swallowed by the tension hanging in the air. You think you know what happened with Dad's business? That the split was just about greed? You have no clue. Mark's voice trembled, and Jake caught a glimpse of the conflict tearing at him. Part anger, part fear. It was never just about money. It was much worse than that. What are you trying to say? Daniel demanded, fists clenched at his sides. Mark bit his lip, visibly wrestling with the decision of laying bare their family's dark underbelly. The company wasn't just failing because of bad decisions. There were games being played. Secrets tied to alliances that took everything from us. His eyes darted nervously over the crowd before settling on Jake. And if it gets out, it could destroy what little trust is left among us. A murmur rippled through the spectators. Karen clasped her hands together, her knuckles white with anxiety. Jake twisted the fabric of his shirt between his fingers. Was their family built on such a fragile foundation of lies? The thought crushed him. I thought I could protect you. Mark blurted out suddenly, his gaze sharp and accusing. But you all deserve to know the truth before it swallows us whole. It's not just your father's reputation at stake. Stop. Jake barked, his voice breaking slightly, feeling an overwhelming need to shield his mother from further hurt. What are you talking about? The weight of the moment settled heavily on his chest. Jake, listen, Mark pressed, his tone shifting, more earnest now. I didn't come here to destroy anything. I came because I didn't want to see the same mistakes repeated. You need to know before it's too late. He looked sideways at Daniel. We all need to know. The air hung thick with unresolved tension, and every heartbeat seemed to echo the unspooling of hidden truths. Jake's mind raced through a myriad of possibilities, wondering how this revelation would transform everything he thought he understood about his family, about himself. Were the ties that bound them together fraying at the seams? What more is there, Mark? Emily's voice trembled slightly, but her eyes shone with determination. If we're going to heal, no more hiding. We have to confront this together. Mark nodded slowly, a flicker of respect crossing his features before the weight of the moment came crashing down on him again. There's something else. Something I've been keeping from you. It's about the trust fund. The rawness in his voice sent Jake reeling, dread washing over him. The faint glimmer of hope he'd held onto now felt slippery, like a dream fading with the morning light. The trust fund had always been a source of tension. It was supposed to be a safety net, but now it felt like shackles. Annie, Mark finally said, haltingly, his eyes darting toward Jake. What you don't know. It's tied to her in a way you can't even imagine. A chill surged through Jake's spine. What did this mean for Annie, his daughter? The fear of losing something vital seized him. His heart raced as he realized this was a turning point. He could either brave the storm or let it consume everything he loved. A part of him screamed to run while another part, the part yearning for truth, stood firm. Jake looked at Daniel, then Emily, seeing the uncertainty mirrored in their eyes. The road ahead was dark and uncharted. Would they emerge stronger, or would this revelation shatter them once and for all? As Mark took another shaky breath, the crowd held on to every word suspended. In the air, that fragile dam was about to break. I need you to understand. When I neglected to tell you this sooner, it could change everything. Jake's breath hitched. What does that mean? The truth hung there, heavy and unyielding, daring him to grasp it. A sudden resolve surged through him. Tell me. It was all he could muster, heart pounding in anticipation of the revelation to come. Mark shifted uncomfortably, the air thick with the weight of his next words. Jake felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back, each second stretching like an eternity. Annie, Mark began, his voice barely above a whisper. Your daughter's trust fund, it's not just a safety net. It was meant as a lifeline, but it comes with strings. Strings that tie back to decisions made long before any of us were born. What are you saying? Jake pressed, his voice rising despite his intent to remain calm. The crowd was silent, eyes locked on Mark, as if they held the answers to all their questions. Mark took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging slightly under the burden of his confession. There were conditions set by our father regarding that fund. Conditions we thought were long gone. If certain events didn't happen as he wished, if the business didn't thrive, then part of it could be lost. Shock washed over Jake, a cold wave that left him momentarily breathless. Lost? How could that happen? He felt Emily's hand slip into his, her grip tight as if to tether him. I found out when I dug through some old papers. It wasn't just about the business failing, Jake. It was about loyalty and betrayal, relationships forged and broken, all tied back to the trust fund. If this family loses what little credibility it has left, what was supposed to protect her could actually hurt her. Disbelief crashed over Jake like a tidal wave. And you've been sitting on this? His heart raced in anger and fear. You kept this from us, Mark. This is unforgivable. I know, Mark retorted, voice rising in desperation. I thought if I kept it buried it wouldn't affect Annie. I wanted to protect you all, but now I see that was the wrong choice. Jake's mind spun, thoughts racing in circles. He caught a glimpse of Annie's bright little face, full of trust and innocence. He couldn't let her down. What do we do? Mark looked down, his eyelids heavy like the reality of the situation pressed on his heart. We confront this. Together. We can't afford to hide anymore. If we refuse to press through the chaos, it could unravel everything. The crowd murmured restlessly, a wave of emotions running through them. Karen let out a shaky breath, glancing around as if seeking solace among the chaos. Daniel moved closer to Jake and Emily, his expression hardened with resolve. We know the stakes now, and if it means exposing the truth, then so be it. Jake felt a flicker of hope amidst the desolation. If they face this head-on as a family, perhaps they could come out stronger. We need to sit down together. No secrets, no lies. Just the truth. For Annie. Mark nodded, visibly shaken. We'll figure it out. Together. Like we always should have. Emily squeezed Jake's hand, her eyes glistening. We'll do this. We owe it to ourselves, to our family. The sense of unity began to stitch together the fraying edges of their family. But beneath that fragile surface, dread lingered like a shadow, ready to pounce. As they began to discuss the next steps, Jake couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. What truths awaited them? And what would happen to Annie when the tide of their shared past churned up all the buried chaos? Hey, Jake called out to Mark as he turned to leave. What was it that Dad feared losing? Mark's expression twisted with worry. Everything and everyone. With those haunting words echoing in the air, Jake's heart sank deeper. How much would they truly have to sacrifice to uncover the truth? And was their family strong enough to survive it? As they braced themselves for the confession to come, Jake felt an impending storm brewing on the horizon, a tempest that threatened not just their family's future, but their very identities. Jake could hardly breathe. Each inhale felt like a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. The laughter and chatter around him faded into the background as he grappled with Mark's confession. How could his father leave such a tangled mess behind? A legacy stitched with fear and distrust. Jake? You still with us? Daniel's voice brought him back, the urgency snapping at his mind like a rubber band. Yeah, I'm here, he replied, forcing himself to focus. All eyes were on him, the weight of their expectations curling around him, squeezing like a vice. Emily nudged closer, concern knitting her brows. What's going on in that head of yours? I am trying to think of a way out of this, Jake muttered, shaking his head. But the truth is, I don't even know the full story. Mark stepped forward, determination tightening his features. What we need to do is unearth everything. Old papers, conversations, anything that ties back to the fund. We'll find the conditions our father set and understand what's at stake for Annie. How do we even start that? Karen interjected. Are we going to sift through Dad's old stuff? You know what kind of mess he left. The room fell silent as they all recalled the disarray hidden within the basement's dusty boxes. Photos, broken frames, remnants of memories scattered across time. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. I know it's daunting, Mark said softly, but we need to face whatever truth we find, whether it's good or bad. It's about Annie now. Jake glanced at Emily. They had shared so much together. Love, heartbreak, hope. Could they truly brave this storm together? We can't let Annie be a pawn in this power play. We need to protect her, even if that means facing our demons. Emily's grip tightened around his hand, her voice soothing as she looked up at him. Whatever comes next, we do it together, Jake. We owe it to her. With a heavy sigh, Jake nodded. Okay, let us get to work. As they stood there, the heat of their decision filled the air with a swirling mix of trepidation and resolve. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, peering down at an uncertain plunge. They would need to commit to this journey through the debris of their family's making, past the truths that might hurt, and the lies that needed shedding. Let us meet in the morning, Jake said, glancing around the group. We'll start fresh, early. Let us squeeze in some time to gather our thoughts. We can all bring what we find and go from there. Murmurs of agreement followed, but fear still nested in the silence that hung between them. As Jake turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of Annie playing innocently in the living room. Her laughter was a melody that felt miles away from the conversation they had just held. Promise me, Jake whispered, almost to himself, that we won't let her down. The storm in his heart raged on as he stepped outside, the evening air cool against his skin. They were all on the precipice, a crossroad of sorts. With every choice they made, every truth they unearthed, they risked tearing at the very fabric holding their family together. The next morning as dawn broke, Jake felt sick with anticipation. What would they uncover? What sacrifices lay ahead? And as the sun rose, casting golden light upon the day, one question gripped him fiercely. Was the truth truly worth the cost? As Jake contemplated the morning ahead, he sensed that the upcoming revelations would either bind them closer together, or finally unravel everything they held dear. All he could do was hope that they had the strength to weather whatever storm awaited them. The morning felt heavier than usual, as if the world itself was aware of the weight resting on Jake's shoulders. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but no warmth reached him. This wasn't just another day, it was a reckoning. Gathering in the cramped living room, anxiety knit their brows tighter. Mark, Emily, Karen, and Daniel all sat with various expressions. Determination, fear, and outright dread mingled in their eyes. And there was Annie, blissfully unaware, coloring at the coffee table. For Jake, that small, innocent smile was both a beacon and a burden. Okay, everyone, Jake began, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. We have a lot to sift through. Mark and I will take the lead in the basement. The rest of you can help by checking the files we have upstairs. Is it really necessary to dig all this up? Karen asked cautiously, her voice trembling slightly. What if we find more than we expect? We can't let this tear us apart. Jake swallowed hard. I know, but we can't protect Annie by avoiding the truth. It's better she hears it from us than from someone else. A heavy silence settled in the room as they nodded, not quite believing it. Jake took a deep breath and headed for the basement door, leading the way like a soldier stepping onto the battlefield. Each creak of the old wooden stairs echoed in his ears, heightening the anxious thrum of his heart. He could almost feel the weight of their father's mistakes hanging in the air, clinging thickly like the dust floating around them. Mark was close behind. You okay? He asked, glancing sideways at Jake. Not really, Jake admitted, trying to chuckle, but the sound caught in his throat. But I've got to be. For Annie. They reached the bottom, and the musty smell of the neglected space filled their lungs. Dim light flickered from a single bulb overhead, exposing boxes stacked haphazardly against the wall, like forgotten remnants of a life lived imperfectly. "Let us split this up," Mark suggested, gesturing toward the piles. "We can tackle a box each. Maybe we'll find something useful." "Right," Jake replied as he slid open the top box with a shaky hand. Inside were old photograph snapshots of laughter interrupted by sudden despair. Faces frozen in time stared back at him. Family gatherings, birthdays, moments that now felt tainted by the burdens they carried. Suddenly, he spotted something familiar, an envelope labeled in his father's bold handwriting. Jake's heart raced as he lifted it out, the flicker of hope quickly snuffed out by the dread looming over what it may contain. "Hey, look at this," he called to Mark, who had opened a box filled with brittle documents. "Hold on," Mark replied, focusing on Jake's discovery. "What does it say?" Jake hesitated, his fingers trembling momentarily before tearing into the envelope. He unfolded the paper and began to read, eyes scanning the words that felt like shards of glass cutting deep. "To my beloved children," he started reading aloud, but the words turned to muddled sounds as the narrative grew darker, revealing conditions neither of them had expected. What does it say?" Mark urged, leaning in closer. "This isn't just about the fund. It's about custody," Jake gasped, pieces of their father's game now starting to come together. The weight of revelation settled over him, suffocating in its clarity. They were not just here to explore a fund. They were wading into a battle for Annie's future. With renewed urgency, Jake's voice trembled. "We have to get everyone down here. This is worse than we thought." Time stretched painfully as he raced to the stairs, fear coursing through him. Would this uncover more than they had bargained for? Each step felt heavy, a reminder that some truths could sever ties forever. The moment they regrouped in the living room, Jake knew it was too late to turn back. He felt eyes on him, waiting, wanting reassurance he didn't know how to give. What would happen next? He squared his shoulders. "Guys, we need to talk," and as silence enveloped them again, he could feel the clouds looming, ready to unleash a storm that might change everything. Would they all emerge unscathed? The back and forth of emotions left him reeling, hoping that this time, the truth would unite rather than destroy. Jake shifted uncomfortably, the air around him heavy with anticipation. Mark was the first to break the silence, his brow furrowed with concern. "Just tell us what it says. We're ready for it." He nodded, heart pounding. "It's about Annie's future. Our father left a will that outlines custody changes." He glanced at Emily, who began to shake her head, disbelief evident in her eyes. "That can't be right. He wouldn't just leave her like that," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Maybe he thought he was protecting her," Jake countered, though uncertainty crept into his voice. "Or maybe he had his reasons. But we have to figure this out. We can't let him decide what happens to her." Karen moved closer, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You're saying our father wanted someone else to take care of her?" The question hung uncomfortably in the air, and Jake swallowed, fighting off the emotions clawing at his throat. "That's exactly what I'm saying. We have to confront this together." Daniel, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. "We can't just let this slip by. We need to decide now what we're going to do." His voice was steady, but Jake could tell he was wrestling with his own fears. "Right," came Jake's voice, gaining strength. "We can either fight for her, or we can let his wishes dictate her future. I know what I'm choosing." Jake's determination fueled the room, but uncertainty still lingered. He looked down at the envelope again, as if it had the answers they all desperately sought. "But first we need to find out what else he may have planned." The group sprang into action, each member snapping into a role. They searched through old documents, invoices, and scattered notes. The basement felt like a dark labyrinth, and every new paper felt like another step deeper into their father's shadows. Suddenly Mark called out, "Jake! Over here!" Jake's heart raced as he joined Mark at a table stacked with old records. Together they sifted through old bank statements, legal documents, and letters. There was something about the meticulousness of their father's organization that unsettled him. It was like he had prepared for this moment, as if he'd known one day they'd have to uncover the truth. After long moments of searching, Mark held up a single sheaf of paper. "This looks different. What do you make of it?" Jake leaned in closer, recognition biting at him. It was the last official document their father had penned, a statement that hinted at hidden assets tied to Annie's trust. This explains everything, Jake gasped, a mix of fear and revelation swirling within him. He wasn't just leaving her a fund, he was leaving the fate of her entire life in the hands of someone else. What do we do if it's rigged? If the money is tied to conditions we can't meet? Daniel's voice wavered, the edge of panic creeping in. We fight, Jake said, the resolve in his voice solidifying like armor. For Annie. Whatever it takes. Just then a child's voice chimed in from the doorway. Daddy, can I come in? Annie stood there, bright-eyed and curious. Jake's heart sank. They had just pulled the veil back on a family nightmare. But here stood the innocent light of the world he was fighting for. How could they shield her from the chaotic storm brewing just beneath the surface? He forced a smile. Hey Annie. We're just cleaning. Why don't you go back to your drawing for a bit? No. I want to help. She insisted, unrelenting. Jake exchanged nervous glances with the others. He realized they couldn't hide from her innocence. As Jake knelt to Annie's level, he felt a swell of fierce protectiveness blooming in his chest. Sweetheart, what if I told you we're trying to make sure you can keep coloring? Would you want to help us with that instead? Annie's eyes sparkled, mischief flirting at the edges of her lips. Okay, I'll help keep my crayons safe. As she darted back into the living room, a wave of warmth touched Jake's heart, even as the darker clouds loomed. The battle for Annie's future was heating up, and it wouldn't be fought in silence. With new determination, Jake looked around at his family. This is it. We need a plan. We have to meet this head-on. And the urgency behind his words was ingested by everyone in the room as they began to huddle together, forming a unified front. What fresh revelations awaited them beneath the surface of their father's carefully curated life? The storm had only just begun. The sun rose over Maplewood, casting warm rays that illuminated the faces of Jake and his family. Today was the day they would confront everything that had been buried for far too long. With a deep breath, Jake stood before the table scattered with the remnants of their father's past, old documents, photos, bills, and now intense revelations about Annie's trust fund. Each item felt like a key to unlocking a door that had been locked tight for years. Okay, everyone, let us focus, Jake said, his voice steady with determination. He could see the resolve mirrored in Mark, Emily, Karen, and Daniel. Whatever we uncover today, we need to be united. This is about Annie. Mark nodded, leaning across the table. We've got to find out how to protect her. If this trust fund is tied to conditions, we need to confront them head-on. Jake felt a wave of anxiety wash over him at the thought of ramifications. But then he remembered Annie's bright eyes, filled with hope and innocence. Right. We need to dig deeper and find out what our father intended for her future. As they began to sort through more papers, the room grew thick with tension. Each document formed a puzzle piece. Some made sense while others only sparked more questions. It was as if their father had orchestrated this entire scenario, but why? We should look into any legal stipulations tied to the trust, Karen suggested, her eyes narrowing with focus. Maybe there's something in his attorney's notes. Good idea, Emily interjected, determined. I'll call their office right now. With that, Emily stepped aside, leaving Jake standing with Mark and Daniel. They sorted through everything, focusing on documents that seemed to have the most weight. Suddenly Mark exclaimed, Jake, come look at this. Jake rushed over, heart racing as Mark held up an envelope. It's a sealed letter from Dad's lawyer, dated the year I graduated. What does it say? Jake urged, an edge of panic creeping into his voice. Mark carefully opened the envelope, scanning the contents. It outlines a stipulation regarding the trust fund. If he died while the business was failing, control of the fund would technically pass to a trustee. What? Who? Jake's stomach twisted with unease. Mark continued reading, his brow furrowing deeper. It says here that our father specified it should go to a family member with the strongest ties to his business dealings. What is that supposed to mean? Jake's mind raced. Was it linked to their grandfather's reckless investments? Or perhaps it was tied to the family's past conflicts. We need to find out who that is. They huddled, determination sparking between them. We'll search every document, every record. We'll uncover every detail, Jake declared firmly. In the other room, Emily returned, worry etched on her face. They said I need to get a court order to retrieve anything else tied to the trust. Her admission hung thick in the air. That will take time, Mark said, the weight of their task settling heavily. We can't wait. Jake felt the resolve pulse through him. This was about Annie. They wouldn't let anyone dictate her future. Then let us get started. The day blurred into a whirlwind of frantic searching, followed by moments of despair and glimmers of hope. They unearthed old bank statements, deeds to properties, each one revealing a layer of deception. Then came the crucial document sealed yet brimming with potential hellfire. Jake held the envelope gingerly, heart racing as he tore it open. Inside lay the clues that threatened to reshape everything they thought they knew. As they gathered around, Jake swallowed hard. The fund is contingent on abiding by family agreements. If any family member acted against the business, control would pass. If it fell apart, so too did the safety net for Annie. Gasps erupted around the room. For years, they thought they were safe from the burdens left behind. Our father wanted to protect Annie, Jake said, frustration simmering. But at what cost? As Jake spoke those words, the room fell silent, each member grappling with their emotional turmoil. Somewhere, amidst the chaos, Annie entered, eyes bright with curiosity. What are you doing? Caught off guard, Jake smiled at her. Just making sure your crayons are safe. He knelt down, willing to shield her from the shadows swirling above. You okay, sweetheart? Yep. Annie beamed back, blissfully unaware of the storm. Jake's heart ached, buried beneath all the burdens of adulthood. Then let us keep it that way. He turned to the others, gathering resolve. We will fight for her, all of us. As the shadows began to recede, they stood together, united in purpose. The revelations from their father's choices had done the unthinkable, stitching them closer together against an unseen tide. And while there would be hurdles, they would face them as a family, side by side, heart to heart. The warmth of Annie's laughter filled the air as it mingled with the encouragement of family. He had been scared of the storm but realized that on the other side of it lay strength and unity. Finally, as they intertwined hands in shared determination, Jake whispered to Annie, "We're going to make sure you'll always have a safe space, no matter what." The clouds departed, and as they shared that bond, he knew they had the strength to weather anything that may come to so. Let everyone embrace the truth. Be brave enough to shine in the darkest moments. Let love be their compass, guiding each step forward. This is where their journey truly began. Now, if you've made it this far, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It really makes a difference. Comment your reactions and feelings about this emotional conclusion. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation.